Welcome back to Let's Talk Careers. I'm so excited to bring another incredible guest. Whether you are watching us on YouTube or listening in to the podcast, I'm super excited. We are going to be speaking with Sunil Mashari, who is the head of strategic marketing for a global management consultancy. Welcome, Sunil. Welcome to Let's Talk Careers.
Maria, hi. Thank you so much for having me on. Such a pleasure.
Super excited. I mean, your story is absolutely interesting, incredible. I know I say this every week, but I mean, the things that you have done, the things that you were told and how you've kind of come through it, I think will make for a very interesting conversation and very inspiring for a young person who might be feeling like they don't really know what they need to be doing right now and think that the world is kind of falling apart. But before we get into those details, I want to take you back down memory lane to when you were a teenager and you might have been hearing around you, hey, Sunil, what are you going to do when you grow up? Was that ever a conversation?
It's a scary thought to think about when I was a teenager. It gives me the chills to think how far I've come, but how low down I was. So I think from a young age, I am a British Indian man. So my parents were born in East Africa, but their parents were born in India. So my upbringing was very much based around like what would be a Indian upbringing in the UK, right? So we were always told from a young age is that, look, we want to provide, my parents always said to me, we want to provide you with an opportunity to like make something of yourself and make sure that you have like everything provided for you when you're older so you can provide for your children. You've got opportunities now living in the UK that we didn't get living in Uganda and Kenya, right? So it was very like stereotypical and we all laugh and joke about it, but it was very much a case of you should be a doctor or you should be a lawyer or you should be a pharmacist or an accountant, right? And ironically enough, my sister did become a pharmacist, and I was always of the ilk of I'm going to be a lawyer, right? So since I was as far back as I can remember, like 8 years old, like I'm going to be a lawyer. Like everything in my life was geared around trying to become a lawyer. But ultimately, as we'll probably unwrap and discover, that wasn't right for me. So I think so it's something that you preach in your podcast with all of your guests. It's like your career path is never linear. It's never point A to point B, right? Yeah. And I think that you can get to where you need to be without following a strict path. So my career is, if it was a cake, the ingredients would be a little bit of luck, a little bit of judgment, so like with some sprinkles of like great guidance, with some sprinkles of going by my gut and using my instinct, taking some extemporaneous decisions. It's all of like sort of a mishmash, which has culminated in me becoming who I am today, which I hope is slightly successful.
As I was listening to you, you mentioned or you unwrapped, you unpeeled a few really key elements of the importance behind, I think, understanding how young people make those career choices, and B, how to normalize making those career choices. So the first thing I heard you mention was when you were retelling the story was bringing in that mention of family. And in the parental influence is one of the strongest influencers when we look at the how young people make their career choices. If we look through that research, you also mentioned some key, what we would say, stereotypical careers that some parents would say would be better than other careers. As you look back at the journey that you had, when you were reflecting, how heavy of a weight did you put on your parents' choices in comparison to what deep down you were thinking, but maybe I want to do something different? Because I think sometimes young people want to make their parents really happy, and they do those things. But then as they're getting closer to entering the world of work, there's a bit of resentment because they never really wanted to do that. And then they feel stuck. So I'm always really interested in understanding how professionals who did have that parental influence and how they overcame it, and then what type of advice they give a young person on their journey.
Look, I think it's an amalgam of your desires versus, in my case, right, what my parents were telling me, right? So because they came from nothing, right? I'm talking, living in a third world country, moving to the UK at a time of social and economic discord in the UK, right? Countering things like racism, countering tough economic climate. I think that their hopes and dreams for their children were always to give them a better life. And I think that was kind of like instilled in us from when we were itty bitty, right? So my dad would work, it's unheard of nowadays. So my dad got a job working in the steelworks, right, in the next town up from us. And he would work something called a back shift. Now, if I said to a young person, Gen Z or millennial nowadays, what a back shift is, they'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So dad would work 9 to 5. He would come home, have dinner with us, like 6 till 7. And then he would go back and do a night shift, 9 till 6. And then he'd have breakfast with us, then go back to work. And that was in the steelworks. That was called a back shift, right? My mum would work 2 jobs, right? And this isn't unheard of in society for people to do that. But obviously, for me and my sister in particular, they were giving so much, right? They would scrimp and save on tiny little things so we could have nice things, right? Whether it be lovely clothes or whether it be nice backpacks for school, like nice school books, whatever it was, right? And that's the moral duty of most parents. But for me, it was a case of retrospective subserviency to that, and saying, these guys have given so much for me, and this is what they want me to do. And this is what I feel like I'm duty bound to do. Ultimately, Maria, I didn't have the freedom of thought when I was younger to say, I don't want to be a doctor. For me, it was always a lawyer, right? So I don't want to be a lawyer, because for me, it was like, I'm going to be a lawyer because that's what's going to make the family proud. That's what's going to be great for me. That's what's going to provide for my future family. Now that I'm at this sort of a point in my career whereby I can give back, right? Whether it be to charity, whether it be to my family, whether it be to my friends. I look back and that has genuinely served me well. Whether I became a lawyer or not, we're about to find out, right? Well, we all know I didn't. But I think that element was never a case of I had this innate desire to be an actor or an innate desire to be a musician or anything like that. For me, it was always, you will work in a professional environment, you will like be successful, you'll make money, and it's all about giving back. Now, that served me well because I had this one-track mind and I was determined to do that in whatever capacity I achieved it. So I don't think it was really a case of like I was hindered or like held back at all. It was very much, they have always been insanely like supportive of everything I've done. And, all the decisions I've made, whether it be moving abroad, whether it be moving a job, changing like my career path entirely. So it's like an amalgam of what I wanted or what I've wanted in my career with what I think will make my family proud as well, which sounds like really archaic and a bit dated when we say it now. But that's how, when I was growing up, that's how things worked. And it served me really well.
I don't think it sounds archaic. I was listening to your story and I resonate with that. My parents are Greek Italian and they migrated from Italy and Greece to give their children a better life. So we grew up with that very same, my parents worked really hard so that my brothers and I could have everything that we needed. And the only expectation my parents had was that we would be happy in our lives and that we would not have to struggle in the way that they did. Correct. So I totally resonate with that. But I love that you mention it, because very often when we're helping young people, either the teacher or the guidance counselor that didn't come from that background will be giving different advice, like don't listen to what other people tell you. You have to be happy. But we do need to understand that parental influence is a big factor when we're making those choices, and that inner moral compass of a young person is going to be a little offbeat if we pretend that that is not an important component. So I really appreciate, Sunil, that you brought that in. I want to dive into the story of when you were aspiring to be a lawyer, and you kind of mentioned it as you were retelling the story. And I love this. Not I love it because of what happened, but I love it because you're going to throw this out of the water. And I hear this with students all the time. Misty, I want to do this. Somebody told me that I can't do it. And this is exactly what happened to you. So you wanted to be a lawyer. And someone told you, dude, do anything but being a lawyer. Like, you've got all these other great skills, like you should focus on those. We're bringing the humor into it right now, but take us back to what that actually felt like for you, and how you overcame and found resilience when something that you really wanted, someone that you looked up to, was saying, yeah, dude, no, not for you.
Yeah, I think, look, ultimately, if for all you wizards out there, if I was like on death's door and my last tear came out and it would dropped into the Ponsieve, it would honestly be one of the defining memories of my life. I remember the guy's name, obviously unnamed. He worked for a very large law firm. I went to interview with him for a role, and yeah, like you said, he said, listen, off the record, interview finished, be anything but a lawyer, anything. It's just like, you've got too much personality to be a lawyer. He said, you don't have the discipline to be a lawyer, right? Now, for any aspiring lawyers out there, like, personality goes well in being a lawyer, but you have to be super disciplined to be a lawyer. And he goes, I can just tell immediately that that you've just got too much energy. Like, you won't focus all of your energy into your work, right? And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize that. So I think, like, one of the things, like, when I was growing up was I really want to be a lawyer, but I didn't really know what that entailed. So, like, everyone thinks that being a lawyer is like Harvey Specter in Suits. It isn't, right? I remember doing work experience with one of my dad's friends, a local family law office in the small town in the UK that I grew up in. And he was a family lawyer. He dealt with divorces, wills, deaths. And I was like, by day 2, I was like, this is the worst thing I have ever done in my life. Like, you know, when you're like, we've all clock watched at work, right? I was clock watching from about 9:03 on Monday, and I was doing a week's worth of work experience until about like the end of that experience. So when this guy said to me, he's like, don't be a lawyer, it was like an epiphany. And it was like, somebody's told me the polar opposite of what I've been being told for the last 18, 19, 20 years, right? And it's kind of like a wake-up call, and you go, oh, okay, I'll sleep on that, and I'll have a little think about that. And then you go, what am I meant to do then? And then you realize to yourself, right, by this little bit of advice, he said to me, be anything apart from a lawyer, but he goes, work in a law firm and do this. Work in a law firm and help the lawyers with their clients. Help them do client listening. Engage with clients. You are personable, you're amenable, people will buy into you, right? It's almost a case of like, I have all of the trust that a lawyer gives, just none of the intelligence or discipline, which I'm completely fine with. So I think that's how it ended up going. And that's when I started hounding out all these alternate positions in these major companies, right? And I didn't realize, no one had ever told me, right, that in a law firm, you need people to market the services. You need someone to develop products. You need someone to hold communications, to have events, to do various elements with clients, go on the client site, listen to them, work out pricing strategies. I was like, surely the lawyers do all of that. No, of course they don't, right? Big business, as we're all aware now, right? Big business have different functions, right? There's in-house legal, there's HR, there's accounting, the IT guys. Like, I remember the first ever law firm I worked for, the absolute belly of that beast was on the third floor of one of like the biggest buildings in London. And it was the print room. Like everything just seemed to operate through that print room. And these guys were like the heart of the firm. And now I look back at it. If somebody says to me, Sunil, I want to be a lawyer, right? I'd be like, what type of lawyer? Do you want to be a contentious lawyer? Do you want to be a non-contentious lawyer? Do you want to work in an American law firm, a UK law firm? What do you want to do? You can't just say, I want to be a lawyer, right? Because that, it just doesn't fly. So I think it was like kidology, Maria, for the first like 19, 20 years of my life. Where I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer, right? And I literally did those eyes. Like, I'm going to be a lawyer, everyone. And like around family dinners, everyone would be like, oh, that's just fantastic. That's wonderful. But au contraire, I think now I would say to someone, really have a concerted think about what you're going to do, particularly in these like subjects and fields where they're quite strict and set. Have a think, like, is that really what you want to do? Do you know what your day-to-day entails? And so it was a blessing, a complete blessing. And then like you could say, like, like in the movies, that was the day my life changed. So it was the day my life changed, to be honest.
So, but you did go down the university path, and you studied European Union studies with law.
Yes.
Why? That's really specific. Why did you choose that, and how did you make that choice?
So I went to the University of Leeds to study that. I have to admit, I hold my hands up to anyone listening to this or watching, that it sounds hilarious that a British guy did a European Union studies degree, given that we left the European Union less than a decade after I did that degree. But anyway, all that waste of money aside, I joke and I exaggerate to make the point. The whole thing was like, for my A-levels in the UK, when you do your A-levels, I did economics, I did English literature, and then French, and what was the last one? Psychology. And I was always like, I should do politics. I really like politics. I was into politics, right? And then so when the opportunity came to do like a half law, half politics degree at university, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the opportunity, you can convert that law degree into a Bachelor of Laws as well. So it's like kind of like buy one, get one free on the old degree front. I kind of jumped at the opportunity to do that. And I remember specifically, this is one of the best like lectures I've ever been to. And it was about how Britain doesn't fit into the European Union structure. We are Europe's other. That's what the lecturer said. Like, we are the other. We're a tiny little island off the coast of mainland Europe, and we are the other. And he said, like, in life, your purpose is to be the other. It's good to be the other. Don't conform, don't fit in, be the other. And I remember that lecture, like, again, another one of my Pontier of tears. Like, being the other is really important. And I think like doing that degree was the start of my journey to like almost saying, right, I'm not going to be a lawyer. I've had interviews where people are like, don't be a lawyer. You need to probably like hound out something that is me not being a lawyer. So that was really great. An amazing 3 years. I say to anyone who's willing to listen to me, which isn't that many people, but anyone willing to listen to me, I always say to them, like, university is like the best 3 years of your life, not just in terms of like, obviously there's the social element, there's the academic element, but I think you really find yourself as a human. Up until like I went to university, I was like just another boy in my hometown that was just, plodding along, like, and I hadn't shaped my personality at this point. I'm still friends with a lot of people that I went to university with. There's one individual in particular, I tell him all the time, every time we see each other, I'm like, Dave, you are the reason why I am the way I am today. Like, I met you and you changed my life. Like, this guy was from London, from complete different upbringing from me. And I was like, you shaped my entire like persona, like at uni, because like you opened my eyes to like, I'm not just a good boy from like my hometown. Like, there's other things I can do. I can pursue other passions. I can, I can be who I want to be and express myself, have more freedom. I became the other ultimately, right? And that's how I kind of shaped my life ever since. So it's a really enriching experience. You get to do things. I feel that in those 3 years, you get to do things and experience things that really set you up for a career, right? There are alternate pathways, of course, and I would never turn my nose up to any alternate pathway to university. I have one of my best friends, Christian. He didn't go to uni, and he would come and visit us in Leeds and be like, "Wow, this life's amazing." But he did an apprenticeship. Now he runs he runs all of the operations for one of the largest banks in the world, right? So it doesn't matter if you go to university, if you don't go to university. Like we keep on saying, nothing's linear in your pathway. It will work out. But I sincerely thought that university shaped me as a person.
I think that the idea of going to university and just the way you retold your story, and I might be looking through my lens as I'm retelling this, is the parental background of coming from, a place where they didn't have anything to the UK to give you a better life. University was not just about gaining knowledge. It was also about social ranking and privilege and something that, they were aspiring for. And I think we need to remember that and respect it. But you're right, there are alternative pathways, and it's not a linear pathway. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
I want to take you back again to the story of your parents. I know I keep going back there, but it is so important. Young people are not really understanding that this struggle between home and school is a big one, and it's impacting their emotional well-being as well. So when you were told, do anything but law, did you go home and tell your parents? And if you did, what was that conversation like? Because that's another tricky one, isn't it? When teachers tell students, don't do that, and students go home and tell their parents, it's that, who do I listen to and who do I not?
Right, yeah. So I think it's something that you learn as you grow, right? Computing various bits of information and coming to a decision, right? Some people will receive multiple bits of information and write it down and look at the pros and cons. Some people will can compute it just, in their mind. I cowered away from a lot of that information, and it wasn't like, "Hey, mum, guess what? I met someone today and they said, don't be a lawyer." Like, I wouldn't have been worth my while, I don't think, at the time. I think it was like, it's more gradual. You drop it into conversation, over a cup of tea, right? Or, over breakfast in the morning, be like, do you know what? Like, you know who's quite successful? This famous person who isn't a lawyer, mum. Oh, that's nice, right? And it's like a build up from that. What I learned very quickly was anything that I've done in my life retrospectively. This isn't just like when I said, look, guys, I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm going to get a job doing X, Y, Z, right? Anything that I've considered that I'm letting them down, or my parents in particular, right? We're talking about my parents. I've let them down. They'll consider me to be a failure. They will never, there's no coming back from this one type thing. It's been the absolute polar opposite. And I have been blessed with the love and support of both of my parents, like, throughout my life, right? It's funny. Just the smallest things that I do for them now gives me a great sense of joy because I'm repaying that debt, right? So when I said to them, I'm not going to do this, they were like, all right then, what are you going to do? I'm not quite sure at the moment, but it's not this. And they were like, all right, let us know. And that to me was like, it's a weight off your shoulders, right? And it was also a case of, oh my God, like, I can be myself and do what I want to do and have this kind of liberty to kind of find a pathway that works for me and will work for them as well in the end. That was amazing. I think for any young person listening to this, not just with your parents, just this is a great bit of advice that I was given. I don't know when I was given it, but I live my life by this rule. You can never get lost in a web of the truth, right? There's always a very clear pathway when you are just honest and true to yourself and true to the people that are most important to you. And I've my dad was very like big on like never ever lie as well. So I think it helped that I was just like, look, guys, it's going to happen. I don't think I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to work in, I think what was my first job? I worked as an account manager in Leeds, right? For a large financial services business. And they were like, are you happy? Yes. Does it pay well? Yeah, kind of, right? Crack on, right? And they never said no to me. So when I moved out of the house, I moved into a flat in Leeds when I was like 21, 22, right? And that's like, it's not unheard of, but you know, when I was growing up, it actually was kind of unheard of. Like I've got cousins and family members who still live with their parents at 36, right? And I'm like, I'm trying to, you know, but yeah, and they were just like completely supportive of everything. They're like, yeah, we'll come visit. And they did. And it was like, it's just a lovely feeling of like, they allowed me the opportunity to become a man, if that makes sense. And like, it seems like such a bizarre thing to say when I say, look back at it and say, they gave me the opportunity to be a man, but they did. And like, I was paying my own bills and I was, you know, getting letters from the council saying, you haven't paid your council tax. And I'm like, am I meant to actually pay this? My parents are like, yes, otherwise they'll take you to court. So, you know, just silly little things like that, which allowed me to grow up a lot quicker and then help me shape my sort of personality, help me shape my professional personality as well. Because I was just doing everything at once. I just moved out and got a job. And that was that. And I'm in this big wide world. So there's a lot of people, there's nothing wrong, by the way, like we're still living with your parents and having that support, like having that support network around you, like amazing. Like, I love spending time with my parents for about 36 hours at a time maximum. But you know, they gave me that opportunity. I took it, and then the rest is proverbial history.
So for any parent listening in,
I love you.
For any parent listening in right now, what I'm hearing you say is you need to give your children time and space to find their way.
Absolutely.
And that didn't make you go so far away. It actually kept you closer in hearing this story, that you felt that they let you become a man, and you are now really appreciating that they've done that. So it's hard to be a parent when your teen is 17 and going, I don't want to do that. And I don't know what I want to do, but I'll let you know. It's hard. It's a hard one for parents. So hard.
Yeah, I think so, because they've always wanted the best for me, right? That's why. And they're like, he's going to have to do it himself now, because like, you know, it's like my dad always says to me, I can't wipe your bum forever, literally, you know, so there you go.
That's a whole different show, so we'll move on.
Yeah. After dark, anyway.
A totally different show, but you know, I want to take you to, I'm really conscious of the time, so I'm going to zoop all the way through. But you started working in a firm that dealt with maritime law. Now, that is not an industry we hear a lot about, but
no.
Tell me more, and tell me what you know about the industry, and if you think that young people should be paying more attention to it.
I wouldn't discount maritime law as a career, because I maintain that those 6-7 years I spent at that, it was an American law firm I worked for, one of the biggest in the world. I think it's top 15 law firm in the world, where I cut my proverbial teeth. I wouldn't discount maritime law as a career. I didn't know maritime law existed when I went into that interview, right? So this is another one. It's like, don't work for this business, work for this business. So I went and interviewed at the firm, and they were like, can you come back in about 90 minutes? And I was like, for what? Like, I did the interview. And they were like, yeah, just pop back in 90 minutes. We don't think you're quite suited to this department, but you are suited to a different department. We're going to see if we can meet some of these people. Now, what the shipping department of this law firm, they had been looking for someone to do this role of client relationships, right? And they quite literally brought me back in 90 minutes after my initial interview to work for their commercial disputes team. Boring. And they were like, here's some partners and here's the office manager for the maritime law department. And I went, hello, everyone. And we got talking. And it turns out that the office manager was born in the hometown that I was born in. So this is, I was talking about the cake earlier. This is that sprinkling of luck, right? Born in the same hometown that I was born in, and then she moved when she was like 10. And like from that moment on, she was just like, as soon as you said that, you had the job. Like you could have said anything after that in the interview, like I gave you the job. So it's like, there's an element of luck there. So what the maritime law industry is like, it's really unique, right? It's made up of some really interesting professionals, as you can imagine, right? So a lot of these people are former seafarers. And then like, I remember one of the partners sat me down on like my first day and quite literally went, right, you need to learn about shipping. And for about a good 6 to 7 to 8 years when I worked for like the shipping department, I was obsessed with ships. I was like, oh, look at that chemical tanker on the horizon, right? Look at it like, oh my goodness, is that an LNG vessel? Wow, look at that, it's beautiful, right? We as a firm did 3 main elements, right? There was dry shipping, which was anything to do with contracts for the vessels. Wet shipping, guess where that occurs, right? Anything that happens at sea, so collisions and breakages, that sort of thing. And then financing ships, and this is like the sexy part of shipping, where they used to finance things like yachts and like finance fleets, or the less sexy side, sorry for anyone who's a maritime lawyer, but like they would like repatriate debt with banks and stuff. But it's a huge industry, right? You don't know how big the pin making industry is in Germany until you find out, my God, they make all the pins in the world in Germany, right? So it's the same with ships. It's like, oh my God, like every bit of food that I've eaten in the last week has been shipped from one place to another and like has been chartered from one location to the other. And there might have been an insurance issue with it. So that's how I ended up in maritime law. Really interesting point. I feel like I have to make this, that there were more women in that department than men.
Oh, that's interesting.
How bizarre, right? Yeah, more women in that department than men, which was really interesting. So it seems like maybe a good career path for any aspiring female lawyers. But it was a really interesting time. I worked with some of the most impressive people I've ever met in my entire life at that law firm in general, and in that department. Absolutely, like apart from my current job, definitely my favorite job.
I can hear the personality in your voice. I can see it coming through your eyes. Definitely. I'm listening to everything you're saying, remembering that trainee that told you do anything but law. You've got the right personality. You need to do customer relations. The interview with the maritime law firm telling you maybe not this department, but this department is for you. Then you win the Culture Champion Award for a firm that has 7,000 people.
Oh, right.
How that came to life and what that means, because when I help young people, I'm looking for little twinkles of who they are coming through and kind of mirroring it back to them. So if you were working with me, I'd be like, you have such a great way of telling stories. You have such a great way of bringing them to life, and we'd be exploring that. Tell us about the Culture Champion Award, and if you believe that your personality had something to do with that, or was it just one of that sprinkle of luck?
I think both, probably both. So basically, this is at my current firm, right? Not at the law firm. So this is at the Global Management Consultancy. And every year, the chief HR officer holds 6 awards based around various elements that make you a good citizen of business, right? Culture being one of them, which is super important in our business. And I think that for any young person listening to this podcast and all parents, right, have a look at the culture of the firm that you are going to spend the next, let's hope, rest of your life in, right? But at least 3, 4, 5, 6 years at a time, if you're like, serious about your career, right? Have a look at the culture. Is it a culture where you work 9 to 5? Is it a culture where you can work from home? Is it a culture where people embrace diversity or corporate citizenship? That sort of thing, right? It's really important. So that aside, how did this come about? I'll be honest, I was sat in my office and a bunch of people were, all I heard was, wow, oh my God. And then a bunch of people run into my office and were like, you've been nominated to be like, as our culture champion for the firm. So the chief HR officer sent an email out with the list of 6 people who get nominated for this award and win these little awards. And I was like, wow, who nominated me? And the funny thing is that I was convinced that certain people had nominated me. I was like, oh, it must have been Steve and Joe who nominated me. Oh, it must have been Vadia who nominated me. Oh God, they're so good to me. They're my friends type thing. And it turned out it wasn't anyone from my local office. It wasn't anyone. I'm based in Dubai. Like, wasn't even anyone from my Dubai office. It was a bunch of people from the London office who were like, this guy embodies spirit and culture. What I had done was set up, it's very, very conveniently set up a mentorship scheme with our corporate citizenship people. And I had conducted that mentorship scheme. I had started to really become like a champion for corporate citizenship and diversity in the Middle East offices. And they felt that was a good thing. I didn't go about to do that to win the Culture Champion Award, let me assure you, right? I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do, and the business offers me the opportunity to express myself and be who I want to be, literally be who I want to be, which is a lot, as you can probably tell, right? But gave me that opportunity to do that, and then said that, like, you're rewarded for that. And it's nice to be recognized for the work that you do that isn't like your core work, day-to-day like job, right? I think it's really important that if you are a good citizen, like in life, right, let alone at work, but like in the corporate arena, I tried to be as good a citizen as I could, and it was recognized. And I think it's a lovely thing. It's become a bit of a running joke now, like particularly like, you know, with your friends, your pally pals at work. They're like, oh, don't mess with the culture champion. Oh, make sure you put that in the bin, otherwise the culture champion will get you, type thing. And that's also quite nice as well. Like, you know, we can have a laugh and a joke as well. But it's something I'm really, really proud of, right? Because we look like we said, there's however many offices. We're X billion dollar turnover business. It's no small feat retrospectively. And I'm in the pantheon of culture greats in the business. But I tell you what that actually also gave me the opportunity to do is it gave me an opportunity to connect with people who were also nominated for awards as well in Australia, in Colombia. So it gave me an opportunity to network and build my personal brand as well, because personal brand is important in the workplace. Like, being one of the numbers is like, getting into a great job is just step one, right? Separating yourself and becoming the other is like step two. So I didn't go about like becoming the culture champion. It just kind of happened, another smattering of luck. But I think it's something I'm really, really proud of. And I think it gives you an incentive to be a good person, like not just in terms of delivering high work quality, which I do, but also like showing leadership, showing that you are someone that can be a role model to, you know, both up and down the ladder, ultimately.
But let's talk about your top 3 career tips. So you say no one was ever hurt from being kept visible, and no one has ever self-imploded for asking an honest question. You can never get lost in the web of truth, and no matter what your career demands of you, family and loved ones come first. That is such a hard one for a young person. I think for anyone at any stage of their career, and for them or for people to think, okay, no matter what my demands are at work, my family and my loved ones come first. That sounds great, but how does it look in practice, Sunil?
If I go to the office, right? I always go like that, right? Because the office is literally just there. It's like walking distance. If I go to the office and I come home and my fiance now, I'm getting used to saying fiance because I got engaged like 3 weeks ago. But my fiance is waiting for me at home, right? And she'll be texting me in the day like, can't wait to see you, really excited to see you. or whatever, and I've had a really tough, horrible day at work, right? What is the point of me taking that out on her? What is the point of me being down in the dumps, right, about something that ultimately will be resolved tomorrow and forgotten about in 2 days' time, and then like being miserable about it to someone who gives her entire world to me, right? Then I think about, like, as and when I hopefully have children, right? My little one comes up to me and goes, Daddy, like, can you spend some time with me? And I go, no, I've got to work. Like, for me, that's not the way it should be. Now, it is super difficult to balance that out, right? Like, measuring your personality and your mood and your demeanor, that's easy, right? But let's say boss Peter, right, and you're someone at home, right? Boss Peter wants you to work until 9 p.m. because we've got a really important project to do tomorrow. But, you know, your loved one wants to go and watch, I don't know, the Barbie movie. I'm making it up as I go along, right? Where do you draw the line? Where do you say to Peter, do you know what? I want to spend time with my loved ones. Or where do you say to your loved ones, do you know what? I have to do the work. So you have to find the sweet spot between the two. That is a skill within itself, right? I remember in the Maritime Law gig, one of my favorite partners there, I went into his office and he had always had time for me. And I went into his office at like 5 o'clock and I said, oh, can I just take like 20 minutes to do? He literally went in my face and went, bath time's at 6. I never miss bath time, ever. He goes, you can call me at 7, but bath time for the kids is at 6. I don't miss it. And that is what made me think family first, always, because these people will be with you for the rest of your life, right? I have bosses whose names I don't even remember, right? Who I would have died for. I would have like gone on the, like, you know, put myself out in the ether for them, right? I don't remember their names, right? I'm going to know my fiance for the rest of my life. It's a balancing act, right? So it's that the family one's really important. Someone who's very close to me in my career also said to me, like, Sunil, like, you work yourself into the ground sometimes. Like, why don't you take some time for yourself? And the irony of that is I booked a trip to go to Zimbabwe, and on that flight, I sat next to my now fiance. So the world works in mysterious ways, right? Where someone said, take some time out for yourself, right? I didn't have family at that point. Take some time out for yourself and for your family, or whatever it was. And that's where I met my now family, right? So the world works very strangely. Don't get lost in a web of truth. We've alluded to that. So you see how ubiquitous that is in my life, because I wrote it down for you, and I've also mentioned it already. And the other one is about visibility, which alludes to the point we were talking about with like lying. Just keep people visible. Like, no one's gonna like jump on you or be like, oh, stop asking me a question. Like, everyone would rather get something right, being asked 5 questions, than something going wrong and having to do 5 days extra work as a result of it. I'm conscious of time as well, so sorry, but we'll do a part 2.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sunil. Great tips. Incredible story. I love that we touched on family influence, the importance of cultural awareness, how not just going to work and doing a job, but also that little extra mile of interest. So for you, it was bringing in the mentorship and cultural diversity awareness. And then, of course, you know, sharing with young people the realization that your job is not your life, and it really is a balancing
act. It really
isn't.
isn't.
I think we can have a whole week series on how to juggle that balancing act, but we're going to have to leave it where it is right now. Thank you, Sunil, for being with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in on the podcast or watching us here on YouTube. I was speaking with Sunil Mashari, who is the head of strategic marketing. I think we talked about everything except for marketing.
Yeah, we could do that. I will commit to a part 2, right? And we can talk about like my job and developing your career. How's about that? As opposed to just like our parents.
If you are a young person watching this going, Miss V, when are we going to talk about the marketing? Promise you, I guess that's the dangling carrot for part 2. Anyway, that's it for now. I had so much fun, Sunil. You can tell
Likewise.
how much fun we had here today. That's it. I'm going to stop talking. My name is Miss B, and you have been listening in to Let's Talk Careers. I'll speak to you all next week when we bring another incredible conversation to the channel. Thank you, everyone.